We leave behind traces of our genetic code every day without even realizing it. It can be as simple as a piece of chewing gum, a cigarette butt, or a strand of hair. One Brooklyn artist has decided to take your discarded info and turn it into art, transforming strangers' DNA into 3D printed portraits. In the year 2013, it's almost impossible to know how much personal data we accumulate every day, and even harder to know who has unbridled access to this information. Heather Dewey Hagborg refers to herself as an information artist, and she wants you to think about the footprint you leave behind. Not just your internet usage, cell phone records, your banking activity, but also your DNA and genetic code. So what you're doing is pretty revolutionary. How did this idea originate?
Well, actually, it's originated from a therapy session where I was staring at a print on the wall and I noticed there was a crack in the glass covering the print and a single hair stuck in that crack. And I just got fascinated by this hair and trying to imagine what I could discover about the person from the hair that they left behind. So that kind of propelled me on this journey towards DIY biology and 3D printing and all the rest of it.
At a presentation in Brooklyn, Heather displayed a few of her DNA-based 3D printed portraits, along with the actual sample the portrait came from and a picture of the sample site. Now, 3D printing is cutting edge and revolutionary, and it's very cool. Why did you choose that medium to help prove your point?
Well, I wanted to visualize these things in 3D, and I don't have the accurate sculptural skills to design that by hand, but I do have coding skills. And so I was able to code a software that can generate these 3D models, and I thought it would be amazing to actually physicalize them, to actually touch them and have people be able to walk up and see an actual face in 3D. So luckily, the 3D printer was developed enough that I could check it out and do some tests, and it looked promising, and I went with it.
Can you briefly explain the process, how you go from a piece of gum to the 3D renderings?
Sure, yeah. Basically, I take the sample and cut it up into lots of little pieces and go through a protocol, standard forensic protocol, where I heat the sample and shake it around and centrifuge it with the right chemicals and end up with purified DNA from the end of that process. And then I go through a bunch of reactions of polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and each one of those reactions tells me about a different trait that this person has. And all those traits I feed into software I've been developing, and the outcome of that is a 3D model that then I send to get printed.
Heather admits her 3D portraits are not 100% accurate, comparing them more to a family likeness or the result of an amateur sketch artist. But human DNA does provide information about a person's physical traits, giving Heather enough information to piece together a face eerily similar to the original person. What can you learn about someone strictly based on their DNA?
Sure. So there's a whole bunch of things that I'm looking at now, and there's also things that I could be looking at that I'm not. So, for example, I'm looking at things like ancestry and traits related to the architecture of your face and your eye color, things of that nature, things related to facial appearance. If I wanted to, I could also look at things like disease risks, but I haven't pushed it in that direction.
Now, I know there's some privacy concerns brought up by your work. What do you have to say to the people who think you're invading on these strangers' privacy?
I would say that's exactly the point. The point of the piece is to call attention to the fact that this is increasingly possible, and if you're worried about it, get involved, say something, participate in this dialogue.
Genetic surveillance is a relatively new concept, but it could have dramatic repercussions in various professional fields, including law enforcement, a concept Heather is not fully comfortable with. I read somewhere that you were collaborating with the police on a cold case. Is this true?
Yes, so I've been working with a medical examiner in Delaware, and we're sort of just starting to feel out how we can help each other out. But mainly, yeah, so there's unidentified remains of a woman who's remained unidentified for 20 years, and they have some skeletal information about her, but they haven't done any kind of genetic analysis to figure out what other kinds of traits we might be able to find out. And so I thought a lot about it because I have reservations about how this technology might be used in law enforcement. But I think that using it in this way, using it to help give more detail to unidentified remains versus helping to identify a suspect, there's a lot fewer risks involved, right? So I think that I can give them some clues that can help flesh out what this woman might have looked like and be beneficial.
Marisa Christian, IB Times TV.